Welcome back to the channel. Imagine you're traveling across the lonely American frontier when you discover a frightened young woman hiding inside your wagon. Her first words are, "Please, pretend I'm your wife until we're out of town." Who is she running from? And why are dangerous men chasing her? In today's emotional Old West story, you'll witness courage, sacrifice, unexpected love, and a life-changing journey across the American frontier. If you enjoy heartwarming Western stories, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing tales. Now, grab a seat and let's get started. The autumn wind swept across the Kansas prairie in 1878, carrying dust over the lonely wagon trail that stretched toward Abilene. Caleb Turner, a quiet cowboy in his early 30s, guided his weathered wagon behind his faithful bay horse. He had spent years working cattle drives across the American West, but now he dreamed of leaving the endless trails behind. In his wagon were only a few tools, a rifle, blankets, and enough supplies to reach Colorado, where he hoped to buy a small piece of land and build a peaceful ranch. As the sun began sinking below the horizon, Caleb searched for a place to camp before darkness covered the prairie. The trail was silent except for the creaking wagon wheels and the distant cry of a hawk. Suddenly, he heard a soft thump from beneath the canvas covering the back of the wagon. His hand quickly reached for the revolver hanging from his belt. "Who's there?" he called firmly. There was no answer. Slowly, Caleb climbed into the wagon and pulled back the canvas. Hidden between flour sacks and blankets was a young woman wearing a dusty blue traveling dress. Her face was pale, her hair was untidy, and fear filled her wide green eyes. She clutched a small leather satchel against her chest as though it held her entire life. Before Caleb could speak, she raised a trembling hand. "Please," she whispered, "don't send me away." Caleb frowned with surprise. "Who are you and why are you hiding in my wagon?" She swallowed nervously before answering. "My name is Eleanor Brooks. Please, pretend I'm your wife until we're out of town." Caleb stared at her in disbelief. He had expected a thief, not a frightened woman asking for such an unusual favor. "What kind of trouble are you running from?" he asked cautiously. Before Eleanor could answer, the distant sound of galloping horses drifted across the prairie. Her face immediately turned white. "They found me," she whispered. She quickly explained that her father had died only weeks earlier, leaving behind a valuable ranch. A wealthy businessman named Victor Harlan wanted both the land and Eleanor. When she refused his marriage proposal, he hired 2 ruthless riders to bring her back by force. Knowing she had no one left to protect her, Eleanor escaped before dawn and hid 2 to 3 in the first unattended wagon she found. The hoofbeats grew louder. Caleb looked toward the trail where 2 riders appeared on the horizon. Without another word, he tipped his hat toward Eleanor and spoke calmly. "From this moment on, ma'am, you're my wife. Stay close, smile if you can, and let me do the talking." Eleanor nodded, though her hands still trembled. As the riders approached, Caleb climbed onto the wagon seat beside her. For the first time since her escape, Eleanor felt a small spark of hope that perhaps this stranger might save not only her freedom, but her future. The 2 riders closed the distance until their horses stood only a few yards from Caleb's wagon. Dust swirled around their boots as they looked carefully at the woman sitting beside him. Eleanor lowered her eyes and gently slipped her hand into Caleb's, praying the strangers would believe the act. One of the men, a broad-shouldered rider with a thick black beard, spoke first. "You seen a young woman traveling alone?" he asked sharply. "She's wanted back at the Brooks Ranch." Caleb remained calm. "Can't say I have," he replied. "This here is my wife. We've been heading west together for nearly a month." The second rider narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "Your wife, huh?" Caleb smiled without hesitation and placed a protective arm around Eleanor's shoulders. She leaned against him naturally, forcing herself to smile despite the fear racing through her heart. "My husband doesn't care much for strangers asking questions," she said softly. The riders exchanged uncertain glances. Just then, several townsfolk stepped out of the nearby general store, curious about the conversation. Realizing they could not seize Eleanor in front of so many witnesses, the men muttered a few threats before turning their horses around. "We'll find her," one of them growled. "Nobody disappears forever." They galloped away, leaving only drifting clouds of dust behind. Eleanor let out the breath she had been holding and quietly wiped away tears. "You saved my life," she whispered. Caleb shook his head. "You're safe for now, but they'll keep searching. We should leave before sunset." That evening, they camped beside a quiet river beneath a sky filled with bright stars. Around the crackling campfire, Eleanor finally opened the leather satchel she had guarded so carefully. Inside were the deed to her father's ranch, family letters, and a faded photograph of her parents. "My father always believed there were still honorable people in the West," she said. "Today, I think he was right." Caleb looked into the fire before answering. "I've spent years riding alone. Never thought I'd be protecting someone else's future." Over the following weeks, they crossed rivers, climbed Rocky Mountain trails, and avoided every town where Victor Harlan's men might be waiting. During the long journey, they shared stories, laughter, and quiet moments that slowly replaced fear with trust. What had begun as a desperate lie slowly became something neither of them expected. Months later, they settled in a peaceful Colorado valley and built a modest ranch with their own hands. In the spring, Caleb stood beside Eleanor in the little church they had once passed as strangers. This time, when she promised to be his wife, it was no longer a disguise. It was the truth. Together, they built a life filled with honest work, love, and hope, proving that sometimes the greatest blessings arrive hidden in the back of an old wagon.